You know, it really strikes me how hard it is to find common ground these days. I
Yeah.
mean, politically, it almost feels like
Hmm.
searching for
Right.
some lost, like, civilization, you know?
Totally.
But are there actually people out there like really working to bridge these gaps,
Uh-huh.
even within like
Yeah.
certain political ideologies?
Oh, that's exactly what we're going to look at today.
Okay.
We are going to dive deep
Okay.
into this effort at creating dialogue,
That's check.
specifically
Uh-huh.
within the conservative movement
All
and
right.
how it's dealing with its current challenges.
All right, so we've got some excerpts here
Okay.
from a YouTube video
Hmm.
called Life After MSNBC, Talking and Listening Across the Great Divide,
Oh, yeah.
which features
Yep.
Glenn Kirshner
I know.
and Heath Mayo.
Okay.
And today, what we really want to understand is
Okay.
the core of this
Yeah.
principles first movement.
Right.
Like, what is this whole thing about? Refocusing on fundamental principles
Right.
in this? What a lot of people see as like a fractured political landscape, you know?
Yeah, absolutely.
So let's start with like
Okay.
what led Glenn Kirshner, the former MSNBC commentator,
Mm-hmm.
to actually look for conversations with people
Right.
who hold like totally different political views? Like,
Okay.
what made him decide to do that?
I'm curious too. Yeah.
Okay, well, so Kirshner, right?
Mhm.
He spent like 30 years as a federal prosecutor.
Wow, that's a long time.
Yeah, and he basically explained
Mm-hmm.
that he decided to leave MSNBC
Okay.
because he felt like he was, and this is in his words, just preaching to the converted.
Yeah.
Like he felt this real need
Okay.
to reach across what he called like the Great Divide.
Right.
And he wasn't just like talking about it.
Yeah.
He actually offered himself as a guest
Yeah.
to different conservative media outlets so
Okay.
he could talk about like the rule of law from his perspective.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So this led him to a pretty big event,
Yeah, it did.
right? Like
Yeah.
a specific.
Yeah, he decided
Okay.
to go speak at this conservative conference
Oh,
that's
wow.
actually happening right now
Okay.
in Washington, D.C.
Right.
And the organization putting on the conference
Okay.
is called Principles First.
So that brings us to like the heart of our discussion here. This
Yeah.
Principles First organization and like what they're all about.
Yeah.
What can you tell us about their origin story?
Okay, so from what we found, Principles First
Yeah.
actually started back in 2019,
Okay.
and it began as like these meetups
Oh, interesting.
for people on the right
Yeah.
and center right
Okay.
who were worried about the state of American democracy.
Gotcha.
And it's
Yeah.
it's actually interesting. It was intentionally created as an alternative
Oh,
to CPAC.
really?
Yeah, the Conservative Political Action Conference,
Interesting.
which
Uh-huh.
some people felt had kind of lost its way.
Okay, I see.
Yeah.
What's also, I think, notable
Yeah.
is the group of people
Yeah.
participating in the summit this year.
Uh-huh.
Like, it seems like a diverse group,
Oh, absolutely.
even if it's mostly conservative.
Yeah.
Right.
The list of attendees is incredible.
Wow.
We're talking about people like Mark Cuban,
Oh, wow.
Republican Senator Lisa Murkowski,
Uh-huh.
Democratic Governor of Colorado Jared Polis,
Okay.
former Republican Governor of New Jersey Chris Christie,
Interesting.
former National Security Advisor John Bolton,
Okay.
George Conway,
I've heard of him.
former Judge Michael Ledig,
Okay.
former Republican Congressman Adam Kinzinger,
Right?
Republican Governor of Arkansas Asa Hutchinson,
Uh-huh.
and of course, as we mentioned, Glenn Kirshner.
Right. It's been called a mix of longtime Republicans
Okay.
and like a small number of Democrats.
So it really makes you wonder what those conversations are like.
Yeah.
I'm curious
Yeah.
to really get like the reason behind Principles First.
Yeah.
I think we need to hear from the founder.
Okay.
So
Yeah.
Glenn Kirshner actually spoke with Heath Mayo,
Yeah.
who
Yeah.
started this whole movement.
Uh.
So what did Mayo say about how this all began?
Okay. So Heath Mayo,
Uh.
his background is actually in corporate law in New York City.
Right.
And he also has experience in management consulting.
Right.
And he called Principles First a passion project
Okay.
that really got going in 2019.
All right. So what's interesting is his own political journey.
Yeah.
Like he used to identify as a card-carrying conservative Republican.
Yeah, he grew up in
Yeah.
East Texas.
Okay, and looked up to figures like Reagan
Nice.
and
Yeah.
both presidents Bush.
Okay.
But then something happened in 2019. right?
Yeah, so what changed for him?
Well, that's when he decided to create this alternative platform. So Mayo basically expressed a lot of disillusionment with where the Republican Party was going, particularly with CPAC.
Right.
He actually felt like CPAC was increasingly becoming what he called a grift show. Which means, it was all about sensationalism and really extreme viewpoints rather than really discussing important issues.
Yeah, substantive stuff.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
So it sounds like Principles First was trying to meet a need within a group of conservatives that felt like the big voices weren't representing them.
Totally. Yeah.
Yeah. And Mayo actually compared
the first idea for Principles First to like a therapy group.
Interesting.
Yeah, for conservatives who felt alienated,
I get it.
But then it changed, right? So it evolved. The main goal became bringing back this idea of a principled first mentality to politics.
Okay.
So shifting the focus away from just personalities or party loyalty, and instead talking about national challenges outside of what he sees as this partisan bubble.
Okay. And it sounds like this concept has really connected with
a
lot of people.
Yeah, definitely. Especially given the interest in their upcoming summit. Yeah, Mayo actually pointed out that this summit is their largest one yet.
Oh, wow.
And it completely sold out.
Okay.
With people coming from all over.
That's impressive. To participate in these discussions?
Yeah, I think so.
It shows you that people really want this kind of engagement.
Totally.
So Kirshner also talked about the 15 principles that are listed on the Principles First website.
Okay, so can you tell us what those are all about?
Of course, yeah. So these principles, they kind of cover a whole bunch of core civic values, for example. One of them says integrity, character, and virtue matter.
Right.
Another one emphasizes that every person has dignity, equality, and worth.
Okay.
And they also say truth, honesty, rationality, and facts are non-negotiable.
Okay.
And then, and this is one that Kirshner really liked, the Constitution and the rule of law are paramount.
Right.
And these aren't really partisan statements.
Oh, they're not.
They kind of seem like they apply to everyone,
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
It's interesting, though, that they're emphasizing these principles in this specific political context. It's almost like they're worried those values are being forgotten or challenged.
Yeah, exactly. Kirshner even said that reading them was like going back to his history and civics classes. Stuff that we should all just agree on.
Yeah.
But as both he and Mayo pointed out, it seems like we're in a time where even these basic ideas are being questioned.
Totally.
Kirshner actually said that he thinks one of the two main parties has lost its mind.
Wow.
And he's talking about
the
huge loyalty to Donald Trump.
Yeah.
So this brings us to the current state of the Republican Party.
Right. So what did Heath Mayo have to say about that?
Well, Mayo actually agreed with Kirshner.
Okay.
And he said it was really disappointing to him that there are so few Republicans like Liz Cheney and Adam Kinzinger who he thinks have always put principle above party loyalty or personal allegiance.
Yeah, he's concerned that a lot of politicians today are more into fame or having podcasts than actually doing the work of governing.
Yeah, yeah.
It makes you think about
what
are the real goals here?
Yeah, exactly.
So it seems like Mayo's not super optimistic about the Republican Party.
He's not. He actually thinks it might take an external disruptor force to create real change. And while he knows, the Democratic Party has its own problems, he's mostly worried about this, this erosion of basic principles.
Okay.
He does have hope, though.
Okay, that's good.
That most Americans still believe in things like respecting each other and equality under the law, as well as, facts and integrity being important.
Those are important things.
Yeah.
So besides this summit, what else are they doing to try and reach their goals?
Well, it's interesting. Principles First is mostly run by volunteers.
Oh, wow.
They have just one paid staff member.
Okay.
So while the summit is their big thing, they've also started having these dinners.
Oh, interesting.
All around the country.
Okay.
And Mayo says the point of these dinners is to create what he calls a new political home where people can have real discussions about national challenges.
So he sees this as a kind of different space for dialogue.
Exactly.
Compared to like...
Yeah, he specifically mentioned groups like Turning Point USA, CPAC, which even though they have different approaches, they still have a big reach and a lot of energy in the conservative movement.
Right.
So the idea with these dinners is to build a new community and what he called a banner of energy for those who feel like the main political options right now just aren't working for them.
Okay, I see. Let's go back to the summit for a minute.
Okay.
It sounds like it's got a lot going on.
Yeah, Mayo said it was jam-packed with all kinds of speakers and panelists. And he also mentioned a change in how they're putting together the agenda.
Okay.
So before, they mostly focused on principled Republicans,
right?
But now they're really trying to challenge those like traditional party lines, which reflects, you know, the political changes that are happening.
So they're trying to get a wider range of views.
Exactly. Okay. So some of the big speakers and topics include a conversation with Mark Cuban.
Oh, wow.
Governor Jared Polis of Colorado.
Okay.
He's going to be talking about the challenges from MAGA populism and certain democratic orthodoxies.
Right.
We'll also hear from Lisa Murkowski and John Bolton.
Right.
Former Attorney General Alberto Gonzales will be talking about the rule of law. Governors Asa Hutchinson and Chris Christie, who both were in the Republican primary, are probably going to talk about what it was like advocating for their principles during that whole thing. And then there are also these discussions about the Constitution and national security.
Yeah, those are super important right now.
Yeah, they're a big part of the summit.
Okay, good.
So George Conway, Judge Michael Luddig, and Barbara Comstock will be on a panel that's going to be looking at threats to the Constitution from the Trump administration. And then Glenn Kirshner is going to be part of a panel with Ashar Renat moderating and Yale Frank and F. Glenn Guti.
Interesting.
And they'll be focusing on threats to intelligence agencies and law enforcement.
All right. So important.
Yeah, they'll probably talk about things like the firings at the FBI and how that affected like public trust.
Yeah, trust in those institutions.
Exactly.
It's worth mentioning why this focus on like institutions and national security is so important.
Yeah, Mayo actually emphasized that people tend to like take those things for granted.
Right, even
if they haven't always been perfect.
Yeah. They do important work.
Yeah, and he really emphasized how important it is to like fight back against all the distrust that's out there and to appreciate the people who are working to keep us safe.
Absolutely.
He also talked about how the world is getting more complicated. And how technology is changing so fast. Which makes these discussions about national security even more crucial.
Totally.
And he sees principles first as like a first step towards having a more informed and serious conversation about politics.
That's a good goal.
Yeah.
So for our listeners who are who want to know more or maybe go to future events, how can they do that?
Well, the upcoming summit is already full, but there is a wait list. You can go to their website, which is principlesfirst.uss. And there you can find out more about the organization, see the list of speakers and the agenda, and you know, add your name to the wait list, like Keith Mayo suggested.
In case something opens up.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, so to sum up today's deep dive, we've been looking at the reasons behind the Principles First movement. Their basic values like integrity and the rule of law, and how they're trying to get people talking in this changing political world.
Especially within the center, right?
And the fact that their summit is sold out really shows that there are people who want this kind of principled engagement.
It might even mean that these core values are becoming
more popular.
More important to people. And as Glenn Kirshner said, that could really help how our government works.
Totally.
So this brings us to a big question for you, our listener.
Okay.
What do you think? Like, what role do you think principled dialogue and a focus on core values can play in dealing with our complicated political situation?
That's a good question.
Yeah. And how could things like principles first help us build a better future for our society? Maybe take some time to look at the 15 principles on their website, principlesfirst.us, and think about which ones really resonate with you.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
Yeah.
I might do that myself.
Yeah, it's interesting stuff.
Yeah.
Okay, well, that's all the time we have for today's deep dive.
Okay.
Thanks for joining us.
Yeah, it was fun.